nominal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flighting down SC off. Bring in SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
Hello and welcome to NSF Live, the weekly show where we grab a couple of the NASA spaceflight crew people and talk about the week in spaceflight. Sometimes we have guests. This time it's just the NASA spaceflight crew. I'm your host, Doss. No, wait. Hold on. Let me check my notes. Wait. Nope. I am Stephen Marr. I'm one of the photographers for NASA spaceflight. I'm going to try to lead us through this hour and a half of talking about this week in spaceflight. With me today on, do I have the right side? No. Well, I'll go this side first. Yes, we have our resident SLS expert, Philip Sloss. How you doing, Philip?
Good, Stephen. I think this is the first time we've met, so
Yeah.
nice to see you.
Yeah, you
I don't
as well.
usually run into show hosts often on the street
Yeah.
like this, so yeah.
on the street, on the streets of the internet, the superhighway, the information superhighway. On my other side, I have our assistant managing editor for NASA Spaceflight, Chris Gebhardt. How you doing, Chris?
It's going well. I'm doing fine. How about yourself, Stephen?
Pretty good. I was actually hoping that by today we would have some photos and a launch of Transporter 2 to talk about. But let's see. Night before last, or maybe yesterday morning, we realized that Haas Briarwood, which is the contracted ship right now to pick up fairings from Falcon 9 launches, is back in port. And at the time, we didn't really have any indication of when the new launch date was going to be, but we do now. And as of right now, SpaceX is targeting Tuesday for the launch of Transporter 2, which we're, as locals, we're really looking forward to because it is a return to launch site landing, everybody's favorite. We don't see a whole lot of those anymore.
I know. I'm also selfishly hoping that it stays on Tuesday because some family that are visiting from another country have never seen a launch, never seen a landing, and they just happen to be here for an RTLS. So I'm like,
Nice.
Yes, come on, but they leave like Wednesday morning, and it's like, come on, we can do this. Like,
Yes. Oh, come on, SpaceX. Yes. Yeah.
right.
Well, and Philip, I guess you're too far away. I don't even know where you're hailing from.
Yeah, it's just a little bit over the horizon out here in Los Angeles. So
Oh, yeah, just a little beyond what you could see.
yep.
All right.
Although
well,
there's
we'll
some
hope
space
for-
hardware coming your way, you know.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we're
there's
gonna get to that.
Something coming through the canal, if I recall correctly. So
Yeah, that's right. Those of you fleet watchers out there, we're going to talk about, of course, I Still Love You making the trek over to the West Coast. But first, I would like to thank our members, everybody that throws us a couple bucks each month. We really appreciate your support, and we need that support. All the live views and stuff that we're able to bring you from Boca Chica and all around. We sent Jack out to see the Virgin Galactic launch test flight. I should have a graphic on the screen right now. Let me. I'm not seeing it.
It's all about the sound effects, right?
Yeah. Wait, let me. I'm typing away. It actually does nothing, folks. But really, we do we do thank the members because that ongoing support, even when there's not a whole lot going on, that really helps keep the ship afloat. And right now, you can see what our first topic is going to be. There's been a lot of Hubble talk lately, having some problems. I don't know anything from the last 24 or 48 hours. So I'm going to pass it to Chris and or Philip, whoever wants to take this. What do we know so far about Hubble?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not the best of news. It's not the worst of news, but it's not great. So 13 days ago, on June 13th, Hubble entered what's known as safe mode. So all of our telescopes, all of our big equipment up there that are uncrewed, have this thing where if something happens to them, they basically put themselves into a safe mode, put themselves to sleep, hunker down, and send a signal back to their controllers that says, something's gone wrong, I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And we got that signal from Hubble on June 13th, and the telescope had put itself into safe mode, and all attempts to revive it and bring it back online thus far have not been successful. The last two attempted resets and tests for the telescope on the 23rd and the 24th of this week, so Wednesday and Thursday of this past week, did not result in successfully regaining control of Hubble and bringing it back online. And unfortunately, what these additional tests showed is that both the backup computer on Hubble and the primary computer on Hubble, as well as numerous primary and backup command paths, are all experiencing the same error. And that's not great because these systems are redundant. So the fact they're suffering from the same thing sort of leads to in the fault tree analysis of troubleshooting what's gone wrong to some other individual pieces of hardware that might be affecting it. Also, what's sort of frustrating this a little bit more for those trying to diagnose the error is that the primary and backup payload computers are the errors that they're experiencing. Any commands the team attempts to write into the system or any attempts to read the payload computer's memory are not working either. So basically what they're at right now is they think it's a hardware component on another part of the telescope. That's the problem here. It could be the command unit or the science data formatter. The command unit on the vehicle sends commands, as the name implies. But sometimes the names are not always obvious, so I always like to confirm. It does exactly what you think it does. And likewise, the science data formatter formats all of the science data that come in from the various instruments before the results are transmitted down to the ground. So they think it could be one of those two things. It's also potentially a power regulator that could be sending the wrong voltages to the systems, and they're just not getting the power that they should be. So it's kind of up in the air. But those are the three main next things that they're going to be working on over the next week. They continue to stress, though, that the telescope is fine. It is not collecting science. It's still in safe mode.
Is it free drifting right now? Is it like they have no control over what its orientation is right now?
So part of safe mode is that it does close the big aperture door at the top of it, so that if it does drift, its optics cannot be ruined by the sun.
Oh, right, yeah.
I believe in certain types of safe modes for Hubble, they still have orientation control over it, but some of them they might not. So it kind of depends on what the fault is here. The other sort of important thing to mention here is that these faults, where they're occurring on a portion of the telescope that's called the Science Instrument and Command and Data Handling Unit. And this is a unit that malfunctioned in October of 2008, just a couple of weeks before Shuttle Atlantis was supposed to launch on the final Hubble flight. And they ended up delaying the Hubble flight for over 6 months as they got the backup SICDNH unit, Science Instrumentation Command and Data Handling Unit, rushed through flight certification here on the ground. And I say rushed, they didn't skip steps, they didn't cut corners, right. They just did it as fast as they could. Right, exactly.
Which is possible, it's like, exactly, it's probably, exactly. I always imagine when they're doing something like that, it's like, rather than working 8-hour shifts, we're going to work 12-hour shifts and we're going to get it done faster. Is that even close?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's basically like if you had one shift that works 8 hours, but if you have 3 8-hour shifts, you can do 3 times the work. You could do 3 days worth of work in 1 day based on the shifts that you've got. So exactly that. So this unit was actually replaced in May of 2009 on the final shuttle flight. So it's not one of the older originally launched components of the telescope. But the telescope is also showing its age in other ways. It was it's toward the end of the video. It's toward the middle of the video. I know what you're looking for, Stephen.
Yeah,
There you
I'm
go.
looking for launch.
I guess the time code didn't come through on the link. My apologies.
Or I probably just didn't notice. That's what it was.
But yes, so yeah, it's not the oldest component of the telescope, but the telescope is also working on. But the telescope is also showing its age in some other ways. The last time it entered safe mode, actually earlier this year, for a problem they were able to quickly recover from, identified a different issue with the driver that actually closes and opens the aperture door, because they discovered that the previous time Hubble went into safe mode this year, its aperture door didn't close, and they were able to catch it in time and switch to the backup motor command system. So, the telescope is 31 years old, and there are a lot of original components still on it, but basically what we just did is we replaced its brain and we replaced all of its instruments. So we basically made it a fully new telescope in 2009, but that was also 12 years ago for a vehicle and an instrument that's supposed to be serviced every 5 years. So it's
and what you're seeing now
age.
on your screen, this is actually the launch of Hubble.
Yes.
But this is the only vehicle that could have gone out there and worked on it with our hands. And we,
right now,
those of you that roll your eyes when we talk about shuttle, well, that was our only ticket to get out there to Hubble and physically work on the hardware. The only thing we can do now is software related. It's the only way we can try to recover it, right?
Yeah. And unless NASA can find a vehicle that can go up there in some sort of economical way and work on it, it's just going to be a matter of time before either the gyroscopes fail and it can't maintain accurate pointing, so it becomes, I hate to say it, useless as a scientific instrument, or something like this, I hate to say it, something like this could get it. And without
are they optimistic?
To repair it, that's what we got to do.
What's the overall feeling? Are they optimistic still that they're going to be able to recover from this?
They seem to have a good fix on what the next round of troubleshooting efforts are. Ultimately, it will come down to what is the failure and can they fix it with software patches or switching something over to a redundant system, because Hubble does everything in Hubble. All of its systems are redundant in many ways. So if they can fix the issue, then yeah, I would say that what I'm reading in the releases from NASA is basically they have gone from we're going to get it back online tomorrow to here's the latest factual update on what's going on. Read into that what you will, but it
always blows my mind that stuff like this can be fixed with software, that they don't have to go out and tinker on it. I guess that speaks to how well the spacecraft and things are made.
Well, and that's why, and you are exactly right, but that is also why I caution it will come down to what it ultimately is, right? Because if it is something on a science data formatter that you can tweak with software, if it's something on the command unit that you can tweak with software, that's great. If it's a power regulator, you might not be so lucky. If physical things are starting to break on the telescope, like the gyroscopes, right? You can do what you can with software patches on gyroscopes, but eventually a gyroscope will just fail. And when a gyroscope hard fails, you can't get it back with a software patch. So, and Hubble doesn't have all of its gyroscopes. That's the other thing, right? Some of them have started to fail already. So
they have some experience with, going back to when they split servicing mission 3 up into 3A and 3B, when they did the 3A call-up, they spent some time looking at, I think they looked at software to do a single gyro, somehow do science pointing with a single gyro. So they might dust those off if they don't have any, if they have some free time. So, and I think they still have a long ways to go in terms of troubleshooting and options. So I don't feel like they're that far through the process yet. It's just a question of maybe they'll find something relatively quickly from here that's like, okay, that's what we need to do, and we can get back into science.
Exactly, and I don't mean to sound all doom and gloom like this is the end. For Hubble, I don't think we're there yet. Like Philip, like you just said, right? I mean, these are just the next three things to go look at, right? Out of a lot. Curious what everyone's questions are about this, though, specifically with Hubble, but yeah, it's not doom and gloom. But not a servicing mission. It's a reality of time.
Yeah. Well, let's see. There is. Oh man, I got my window all shrunk up. Thomas Anfang did want to know, even if servicing Hubble is impractical, I genuinely hope a Starship is sent to retrieve her. Starship comes up already. I can't believe it. Hubble deserves to spend a retirement next to Discovery, adored every day by the generations she inspired. That's true. It's not so much a question, I guess. I looked over there real quick and saw Hubble and thought, oh, it must be a question about Hubble. Okay, well, here is a question. Could they fix Hubble by sending up the equipment they need to fix it on Starship and sending the crew on Dragon? The Starship could carry an airlock and spacesuits, so the crew could leave Dragon. That's actually that's a pretty good question.
So I'll take the specifics of the question, and then I'll take the sort of larger thing that the question is sort of poking at, which is what could we actually do, right? We don't have the shuttle, so what could we do? And that's really what you just said, that sort of mission architecture is the one that I think would be the easiest, right? Because you have Dragon, which is certified to carry crew, and Dragon can carry a docking port. Right, we know that the starships will be outfitted with docking ports for Orion to come up and dock with them. So, if the spacesuits are on a starship, if you basically have a lunar hybrid, starship, and by that I mean a starship that carries both cargo and habitable volume for crew members as well, then you would eliminate the sort of issues of, spacesuits sort of barely fit out the Dragon airlock as they currently exist.
Right.
How would you pre-position all of the hardware that you would need to get in, and all the equipment because it wouldn't just be a hardware update, right? Like all the science community would be like, and we're replacing all the science instruments too, again,
Oh,
like
yeah,
we're getting ourselves a brand new telescope again.
Because we haven't been there in 12 years, right?
In 12 years, right.
Yeah.
And all the missions upgraded the instruments when they went up. I think 3A and 3B split the instrument upgrade between them. But yeah, so that would be a way to do it. The other thing that they would have to consider, but that wouldn't be a showstopper, is that one thing that STS-125 did attach to Hubble was a capture mechanism, so that in the future, if some sort of robotic servicing mission were devised or some need to deorbit the telescope, so it didn't just come crashing in wherever, because we don't want it to do that, was attached to it. So there are ways that you could potentially devise the Starship being able to approach it and kind of dock to it, right, to provide the hard work surface that the crews would need for the telescope to be secure. Because Hubble used to be grabbed by the Canadian arms, by Canada arm on the shuttle. It wasn't, but there are things that they added to it to allow for these sort of remote grabs, remote dockings of future vehicles, even though they had no idea what those were back.
Does it have one of those, like the thing we see on Dragon, like the little plate thing with the
No, so it's not a docking port, but it's basically just they affixed things to the outside that robotic vehicles could go grab if they needed to. Yeah.
Okay.
So again, it's a tall ask, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, in terms of any other vehicle that could do it, never say never, but I'd be hard pressed to find one without a Starship involved at this point, just because of the cargo up mass you would need.
All right. Well, we have a few more questions, I think, before we move on from Hubble. Harry Young says, worst case, how soon could they send a disposal tug to Hubble?
I believe worst case, so we would just be talking about natural atmospheric drag that would decay the orbit. it is anywhere between the mid to late 2030s and the early to mid 2040s at which atmospheric decay would pull the telescope back in. So it's not
low enough to go send out a disposal tug, you mean?
Oh,
are they talking about
until its orbit would naturally decay? So
just all the way.
Right. So basically, you have until that point to send a tug up there that would deorbit it in a controlled manner. But it's about a 10-year window, 8-year window beginning in the mid to late 2030s for that.
Okay. Let's see. Another question about using Crew Dragon. I guess we kind of covered that.
I think that's a popular question for how to do it.
Well, and it's a very it makes sense. It's a logical
because it's
question
it's our only human launch vehicle in the U.S. right now. So yeah, I get it.
Okay. Patrick wants to know how long will they spend working on Hubble, trying to fix it before they give up?
They won't give up until it's either known that the problem is a hardware related thing that cannot be fixed without hands-on. But they will not just go, okay, it's been a month, I guess that's it. Like, no. They will exhaust every possible scenario before they would either call it or before real legitimate questions of, okay, before it comes back in, what can we do to go service it or bring it back, or dispose of it somehow would take hold at that point.
Yeah, bringing it back would be amazing. That's quite an undertaking to go and grab it and bring it back when we don't have a space shuttle,
It is, considering there was an original plan to bring it back on the shuttle for display at the end of its life. I think, though, I would personally advocate, instead of, as great as it would be to walk into the Smithsonian and see it hanging above Discovery, which was the vehicle that launched it. I just hate throwing away a good piece of technology when you can simply upgrade it and let it keep going.
Yeah. Let's see, one more.
Just to throw it also in there, I mean the operations and the support operations team, or the team that supports operations and science. I mean, they're they planned on just doing operational support through this whole period, and so now they're working on troubleshooting. But like Chris said, there's they'll just keep going and working on this until they fix it, basically. Yeah. They come up with a solution.
And then let's see, Ross's question was when Hubble retires, will they deorbit it or put it in a graveyard orbit?
Your options for Hubble, and this is a great question, because we talk about graveyard orbits sometimes, specifically the geostationary graveyard orbit. That's really the only graveyard orbit that there is. There are no low Earth orbit graveyards because atmospheric drag, even at Hubble's altitude, I think Hubble's right now hovering around 520 kilometers-ish up, so about 100 kilometers higher up than the International Space Station.
It's actually not as high as I thought. I, for some reason, thought that it was like way high up there, like mid-orbit.
So it used to be 550, 560, 580 kilometers up. I think even a little higher than that on one of them, because there was a Discovery servicing mission that really, really boosted it up there, and it's the highest a shuttle ever went for in their operational lives. But basically, even at Hubble's altitude, even that high up, there is still atmosphere that slowly drags you down, slowly reduces your velocity over time, that lowers your orbit. And the lower your orbit, the thicker that atmosphere gets and the greater the drag becomes.
We should grab that tweet from Tori Bruno this week. Yes. There's a really nice graphic that's got it shows the sort of bands of orbit altitudes and how long those orbits last, from hours to
I bookmarked
years
that.
to
I bookmarked it. Let's see, where's it at?
Because it's something like, if we were to never do anything with the International Space Station, it would come back in within 3 to 5 years, depending on atmospheric density. But 100 kilometers further up where Hubble is, it's 20 years before that same atmospheric density would drag you back down.
Or I thought I did. Oh no, I saved the image to my phone. That's what it was. Here.
It's
I
on
wonder
his
if.
Twitter feed.
Yeah. Do you remember when it was? I can grab it real quick.
It was this week. I know they were talking about it. I think Elon talked about it with respect to Starlink. Those orbits and they essentially tuned that altitude. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
there we go. Yeah, I thought this was such a cool image here.
So yeah, you can see 550 kilometers. That's kind of approximately where Hubble is.
Yeah,
Tris. So
yeah,
it's
a little
years.
below,
yeah, but it's that was pretty much the limit, the ceiling for shuttle with their ohms fuel load.
And just to be clear, for people that may not know, Hubble, because I'm not sure, I'm certain, but Hubble has no way to boost its own orbit, right?
No,
does
Hubble
it
has
use
no
any thrusters at all? It's all gyros, right? There's no RCS or anything like that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Which correct me if I'm wrong, Philip, but my memory seems to recall that became the big critical thing of why they split servicing mission 3 into 3A and 3B and rushed Discovery to launch in '99 because the gyros kept failing, and if enough gyros failed, they wouldn't have had the ability for Hubble to control its orientation when the shuttle went up to grab it.
That's the way I remember it. It's only been 22 years, but or 20
probably
I know.
The only thing I can really interject here, just as a photographer, to help people understand why the orientation and pointing is so important, because if you know just a little about photography, you've probably heard of long exposure photography, where if you're taking pictures of stars or something really dark, you need to point at it. Your camera's got to be on a tripod and sitting really still and gather light for long periods of time. Well, the same rules apply for Hubble. It's pointing at things that are hundreds or millions, billions of light years away, and it's zoomed in very a lot, and it has to be pointed perfectly at that object for very long periods of time, and so it has to be extremely accurate, and that's what these gyros do. And if it loses that ability, then
Right. And it's the added thing. So imagine you doing a time-lapse photography of a single star at night, and you're on the ground, but you also have to account for Earth's rotation as well.
Right.
So
that's what Hubble, and you're orbiting at the same time.
Right. It's not just maintaining a rock solid orientation, it's maintaining a rock solid lock on its target as it's orbiting, and your target is shifting in the degree heading that you need to be pointed. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's an incredible control system that the gyros allow. Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's move on. We've already burned up the first 30 minutes talking about. Well, Hubble is a really cool piece of equipment. I mean, it's really neat. But lately, we've been getting images coming out of the VAB.
I was going to say, is it time for Battle of the Heavyweights?
Right. Yeah. So SLS is being integrated inside the vehicle assembly building. And well, let's see, Philip, do you want to kind of tell us where we stand? I was in there months ago, and I got to see the solid rocket boosters there. There was no core stage. Of course, since then, the core stage has arrived. So where do we stand here?
They just mated the core stage. What was that? June 13th, I think, was when they finished hard mate. And then the interstage adapter, it's called the launch vehicle stage adapter, was lifted up into the high bay on Monday night.
Or did I get lost?
I don't know. I can keep talking if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Keep going, Philip. You're good.
Okay. So they lifted the LVSA up into the high bay on Monday night into Tuesday morning, and they were able to set it down and get it soft mated on Tuesday. And basically since then they've been working on fully securing it to the core stage. So they did get as far as they've got all the bolts in, and I think basically they're trying to finish securing it. So maybe this is the same type of bolted flange that they use to bolt all the elements of the core stage together. So around the 360 degree circumference, you've got a bolt every degree. So 360 bolts. And so there's requirements in terms of how much of a gap you have between the flanges themselves when you bolt them together. And of course, neither of them are perfectly flat. And they've run into some issues. I was just hearing that they're still working on it this weekend. They're still working on basically finishing the complete hard mate process. And so what happened was when they started the lift of the LVSA on Monday afternoon, they were still hoping to lift the upper stage. And I have to be careful. I need to stop calling it an upper stage because in this application it's an in-space stage. But the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, ICPS, they had been planning on lifting that up and stacking it on top of the LVSA Thursday night into Friday, and that's now sliding pretty far into next week. It's last we heard it was starting to slide towards the middle of next week before they can do that, and they're just working on these first-time issues, and so they have a few of these. They call them non-conformances. So as an example, the flanges on the bottom of the LVSA and the top of the core stage, the top of the forward skirt, are these welded rings, and they're friction stir welded out of six. It's a 6-piece forging. So in between those forgings, you have a little gap where the welding pin runs up and down through there. So you have that gap spans a couple of those bolt holes, and so they put this thing in there called a splice plate, if I'm recalling the name correctly. Well, so when they went
and
to
do I
grab
have an image of what you're?
Not
do I have an image of what you're talking about here, Philip?
Okay. I don't think there was some B-roll that they released. I don't know if those would be like.
That's what kind of killed my internet, I think.
Oh, goody.
Because it was like a high quality video or something, and so
those
that's
would
what
probably
kind of
be
killed
good things
the internet.
too. Let's see. I don't see anything in there. But anyway, those little splice plates are they're sort of like they're like a T-shaped fitting that goes in there, and it's essentially it's kind of like a doubler, and so when they pulled those to go install them, they did an inspection of a couple of them, and they weren't apparently to spec. So they're addressing that. I guess there may be some other issues with, it's there. I guess we'd heard some issues with some slight corrosion on some of the bolt holes. It's a lot more humid than it is here in Los Angeles, and so some of the hardware, maybe the propulsion hardware. This is one of the simpler pieces. It really is just a cone, a structural cone that houses the most of the upper stage. So you won't see all you'll see of the ICPS in the stack when it's fully stacked is the hydrogen tank, and underneath it you've got a truss structure, an oxygen tank, and then the engine. So you can see the little dark areas in the very bottom of the ring there. Those are similar types of fittings to these splice plates that they're installing. So at this point they're just working through some of those discrepancies between parts and what and the part specs, and but it's bolted onto the core stage. So what you're looking at here this is in High Bay 4. This is where they stage those things. In the lower left there is the Orion mass simulator. That's going to be the last thing stacked before they get into their first series of tests. And now this is in the transfer aisle. At the very bottom of the image, there's the top of the ICPS. and they're looking at that as they took the LVSA across from High Bay 4 into High Bay 3, and then this is looking at lowering it down onto the forward skirt. And so this was really early Tuesday morning, the 22nd, and so they're far enough along now where they've taken that lifting beam and the crane away, and so it's really they're just trying to make sure that it's secured to specification at this point. So so we'll just be waiting basically to see when they lift the next piece, which is the ICPS. Then they will put a it's another little spacer essentially called the Orion stage adapter, and in fact they're going to use for this first set of tests. It's going to be the structural test article, and it's really just a structure in this case, and then that big white cylinder that we saw. That's the ICPS. It's basically they're going to leave it in that. It's a storage canister, but then it also allows them to maintain a gaseous nitrogen purge. All of the sort of business end of the stage is somewhat exposed, so that includes all the avionics and engine and fittings and the nozzle extension. It's a deployed nozzle, so all of those things you keep those nice and at a constant temperature, and you also keep them at a constant humidity in there until they get ready to lift it up into High Bay 3. So, but that's right now. That's off into next week. While they're doing that, so what we've seen kind of over the last month is we've seen these dates you've seen these little interruptions of a day here, a day there. That path of work is it is sort of drifting to the right, but they're also working
the first time
on.
They've ever stacked it, right? This is the first time they've actually put it all together. So this is sort of to be expected, right?
Yes. So really, it's going to be a question of they've already started kind of improvising in terms of rearranging work blocks while all this stuff's going on up at the top of the vehicle. The core stage has now been stacked for a couple of weeks. Down at the bottom of the vehicle, they've opened the access doors to the engine section. They're installing the work platforms. And one of the other things that we've seen with the work schedules is that now that the stage has been there for a while and they've continued to do green run post data processing, there's a sort of a higher definition of work to what they're going to be doing in terms of the work that they deferred from Stennis to Kennedy. Mm-hmm. So as an example, they had an issue with the clutch mechanism on the pre-valves in the core stage, and they've decided to go ahead and do the repair or remove and replace of just that part of those pre-valves. So they're going to start doing that work here in the next several weeks, and so one of the ways that they can sort of get ahead in one path of work while the stacking is being worked up on the top of the vehicle is they'll, instead of waiting and doing that closer to the end of the flow, they'll just since they have time to do it before they power the vehicle up, they'll just go ahead and do that now. And one of the other things that they've decided to do is one of the previous schedules we saw was the first test is where they power the vehicle up and they do a full checkout of all of the connections from the umbilicals to the vehicle and from the stages to each other. And what they've decided to do is to power the vehicle up and power the SLS part up of the vehicle up and reconfigure the stage from the Stennis configuration, which they did in the stand there, which is a couple of examples would be they open the pre-valves up before they ship and they put these things called blanking plates into the lines, and that allows them to keep the tanks pressurized at a pad pressure while they're on the barge. And so they're still sitting in that configuration. And well, of course, in order to command the valves to move from one position to another, they have to power the vehicle up. Well, that'll also give them the first opportunity to see all the core stage systems and the booster systems connected. So they're continuing to do that integration work below the LVSA and the ICPS, and then the upper the rest of the upper elements as they stack them. So another thing they're continuing to, the launch teams continuing to prepare for countdown. There were a couple of stills that
I was just about to ask you.
They posted a video of the terminal countdown simulation that they did on Thursday, but I guess it was removed for some reason or another. But these are a couple of the stills. So this is firing room 1 in the launch control center. You're actually the launch pad would be out behind those windows there, and of course that's one of those things that they've done since Saturn days, which is the team is actually, and the management up on the top there are actually facing away from the vehicle. They're looking at their screens and they're doing their work, and the management only spins around once the vehicle's lifted off.
Mm-hmm.
So
I always thought that was weird, like like watching, like, I don't know, Apollo 13 or something, and like, wait, aren't they all facing the wrong way? I don't know if it was Apollo 13, but why do you have any idea why they chose to orient the desks and stuff that way? Is it to keep them from being distracted from the launch?
I think that's part of it. And then, of course, you can see down below them, this is a different arrangement than, for instance, for shuttle, pardon me, or for and for Saturn. But most of the people in the middle here, these are probably integration console people. Those are the people that would be doing troubleshooting of issues. And you can see they're oriented differently. So this is it. Now you're looking from the background of the last picture. Now you're looking the vehicles behind you. In front here, you actually have on the left, and kind of from the left to right, you have the NASA test director positions. And then over here, looks like it's slightly off the screen here, these would be the analog to the old orbiter test conductors. So actually there's the person in the blue shirt, and then the person to the right of that person, that's Jeff Spaulding, that was the primary NASA test director for STS-135. And then I think the fourth person to the right, and she may be a little bit slightly off to the right, that's Roberta Wyrick. So now orbiter test conductor position is now called, for the launch vehicles, called SLS test conductor. So those are a couple of the people, and of course the launch director is Charlie Blackwell Thompson. All three of them were in the launch control center, and they were in firing room 4 for the last shuttle launch. But we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of that, and so we actually are trying to get an interview with some of them to talk about shuttle and launching SLS.
Yeah.
And so this is interesting to me just because you can see that's a simulated image, of course, but these are the types of views we would like to see of the vehicle when we get into launch counts. That would be a view up on those screens. That would be one of the OTV operational TV cameras that would be on the deck of the mobile launcher, and you're looking at on the left there, that gray structure. Those are the tail service masts for the core stage, and you can see those arms extending up to the engine section. Those are the two umbilical plates there, and then you've got the booster. You've got the right-hand booster in the foreground, and the core stage in the middle there. And so this was their last standalone terminal countdown simulation, and all that means is that now, as launch gets closer, they're going to start bringing up other control centers and start doing integrated simulations. So they'll start doing simulations with Mission Control in Houston. They'll probably start bringing in, places like the Huntsville Operations Support Center. So there's a specific SLS support center at Huntsville, since that's the primary home center for the vehicle, for the launch vehicle. And then the Orion home center is Johnson. but all of those centers will be up live when they tank the vehicle and during countdown. And so they're going to start doing simulations of the entire sequence from the beginning of propellant loading, the hours and hours and hours until you get to terminal countdown. And then they'll probably start, they'll be simulating things like cutoffs and recycles. You now have a vehicle, or not a vehicle, but you have a lunar launch window. And so they're going to, they at least have the requirement and capability of, well, if you had something stop the countdown right before launch at the beginning of your launch window, in theory, you could recycle back to an earlier point in the countdown and take another run at it.
How long are these lunar windows?
About 2 hours a day.
Okay.
You know, they're going to be.
Then it
this
shifts.
is something we're trying to get into here, hopefully before we get closer to the launch periods. But there are approximately 2-week long launch periods, and then each day there's about a 2-hour long launch window. Within the periods and within the windows, you'll have cutouts. So it won't necessarily be something like a collision avoidance, but there may be COLAs. You'll hear those sometimes called that, collision avoidance, during a launch window. But there are also cutouts. So within a 2-week window, there's sometimes a day or 2 days where they can't launch. And then, of course, for this very first launch, they only have enough hydrogen to do one launch every 48 hours, or one launch attempt every 48 hours. So
one
those
launch every
will be the
48
kinds of
hours.
things that we'll
They can
start
do
to
it
see.
every few days.
And Philip, I'm curious on one small element of the launch window, especially just for Artemis 1. Do those 2-week periods of time account for the daylight lighting constraints? Because I would assume, given that this is the first flight of the vehicle, that the preference is to launch it during the daylight hours with very specific rules about cloud coverage allowances and things like that for tracking. Are they taking that into account yet, or are we just sort of seeing, like, here's what the windows are for the November to March timeframe?
Well, so we actually asked about that a while ago. The main driver in terms of daylight is actually recovery of the spacecraft at the end of the mission. And so if they have to choose between a daylight launch and a daylight splashdown so they can recover the spacecraft in lighted conditions, even though this is an uncrewed flight, they're going to go with lighted conditions for splashdown. So they would launch. I'm sure that there will be the weather rules for the first launch. I think will still be very more conservative than perhaps later, but I believe they would accept. And if I recall correctly, you know, we're looking at a launch at the end of the year, early, end of one calendar year, going, or maybe a better way to say is a northern winter. So end of 21, early 22. Those are the types that seasonally that would be when you would have a nighttime launch or a launch in darkness. So that would be, that's probably what we're looking at least for right now. So so we're just, we're in terms of where they are and where they're going. They're stacking the vehicle. That's going a little slower than perhaps they'd hoped. But they're continuing with working on establishing access inside, and we'll see where they get to. Like a good checkpoint will be when they power the vehicle up. Let's see where that is. Is it the end of July? Is it August? And then that'll kind of give us a sense of, where are they going to be in terms of launch.
Philip, there's actually we have a super chat question directed at you. Let's see if I can get it up on the screen. Philip, even though everyone thinks of Super Heavy and SLS in a race for flight, back in the ITS days, that's Interplanetary Transport System, did you think they'd be even remotely close? Are you surprised both programs are now intertwined?
That's I guess well, before you get to the opinion part, what's happened is that SLS has been delayed so much that it's now, first launch is now early, in that early 2022. What's the difference between December 29th and January 3rd?
Right.
So, they were supposed to be launching, okay, maybe not end of 2018, but 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
So, it's they're different. I think we talked about this the last time I was on about different development philosophies, and obviously different streamline. One organization is perhaps a little bit more streamlined, has a different authority structure than the government is of maybe too many cooks kind of thing. And so I would say, I guess I would say I'm not surprised that SLS has slipped. It is a shuttle level complicated vehicle, and shuttle slipped quite a bit itself. So I'm not shocked that it slipped this far. I would say conversely, with SpaceX and their development, I do think, I don't know that I'm shocked that they've gotten as far as they've gotten already, but I do think it's a little bit of a surprise how well and how much they've accomplished in a relatively short period of time, because they're of course also developing. They're not just developing a vehicle; they're also developing their engines and their propulsion systems at the same time. Whereas SLS was, they've already got the engines, they've already got the boosters, and now they just need to develop the stages for that. So I do think it's interesting, and I mean there's definitely a decent chance, I would say, that the Super Heavy flies before SLS flies for the first time.
And what this question, I think you can hit with just a few words, so I'll go ahead and hit it. Sam K says, no, it's fine. I just know that we've got other stuff we want to carry, and wow, we are really already almost in an hour. Okay. During flight, does the interstage adapter remain connected to the core stage after staging, or do they stage independently of each other?
The former. So it'll stay with the core stage, and the ICPS will separate from the top of the LVSA. So
okay,
that's the way.
So there you go.
Now that they're bolted together, they're never going to be disconnected until they burn up.
All right, and never the two shall part. All right, well, here, I'll just show you what we have to talk about next. I know this little ship just left us, a week, 2 weeks ago? I can't keep track of time. Of course, I still love you.
Our first drone ship.
Yes, I know. So of course I still love you. Left when it did, and was towed.
Love it.
Whatever that was.
And went down to the Bahamas and teamed up with Mighty Servant 1, which is a semi-submersible vessel that actually dunks itself down into the water, and then they can position, of course, I Still Love You over top of it, and then it raises itself back up, and now, of course, I Still Love You is on a boat.
Going through the Panama Canal. Yeah.
That's right. What's going on here? Yeah, take it away. I'm gonna pull up these other images here.
Yeah, so the vessel is about half-ish way through its journey from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station here in Florida, through the Panama Canal, up the western coast of Mexico, and the southern portions of the United States to the port of Los Angeles. Let me try that word again. Port of Los Angeles. So just like a few years ago when they brought Just Read the Instructions through the Panama Canal on a ship just like this to bring it to the East Coast to support our rapid cadence of launches, and we needed 2 drone ships out here, they could do that because there wasn't really a manifest in Vandenberg, and all the missions that were sort of on the docket at that point could do return to launch site landing. So there was no need to maintain the drone ship at the port of LA when the East Coast really needed to. So now that the East Coast is getting a shortfall of gravitas and getting the big shiny new drone ship, we are sending the oldest drone ship in the fleet back through the Panama Canal, or rather SpaceX is, to support the West Coast launch cadence, which will be ramping up here. Theoretically, as soon as next month. We'll see how that goes. If I were a betting man, we might say August. But basically, SpaceX is now on track to start launching Starlink missions from the West Coast into the polar orbital shells. And this requires a drone ship landing because the Starlinks are packed on to basically as many as you could put on and still recover the booster on the drone ship downrange. So that's why, of course, I Still Love You is going through the Panama Canal right now, getting about halfway through its journey, so we're expecting it there. I'll let Gavin make that determination once it's through the Panama Canal.
Right.
Back in the open waters. But yeah,
and
that
we
was
have
one of
this
the cool little things today.
Harry Stranger on Twitter has the, I don't know if, I'm honestly not sure, Harry, if you made this or if you found it somewhere, but we have this time lapse, which I love time lapse, of it going through the canal, and you can see how it works, because there's just a thin strip of land separating the Gulf of Mexico from the Pacific Ocean, and the water levels are not the same, and so they have they have these locks. So
it has to go up several hundred feet and down over the terrain of Panama. It's a really complicated canal.
Right. And it's been, how long has that been there? How long has Panama Canal been there?
Late 1800s, early 1900s when it was built.
Early 20th
and first
century.
open.
Okay. And we are expecting a shortfall of gravitas semi-soon because do we have an idea yet? I mean, I
don't think we have a firm idea for when a shortfall of gravitas will show up. June was sort of the odd month for SpaceX, where every single mission that they did was a customer mission and not a Starlink. If you've heard us say it's the I can't believe it's not Starlink show, that's pretty much what June was, and still promises to be with Transporter. Of course, Transporter 2 can return to launch site land, so it doesn't need a drone ship. That helps ease some of the congestion. But basically, once we get to August, we get back into the Starlink pattern, so they can just stagger the Starlinks on the drone with the drone ship schedule until a shortfall of gravitas can be here. But I don't believe a shortfall of gravitas is too far away from joining the fleet.
Yeah, it's funny. I went up to the port the other day to see Haas Briarwood because I knew it was back. But then when I got there and I saw Just Read the Instructions, I was like, oh man, they brought the drone ship back, and then I had to remind myself there's no drone ship necessary for this one.
Right.
So here's an image by our friend Gavin, who goes by SpaceX Fleet on Twitter, showing just the progress. And let's see, how old is this tweet? I'm gonna hit that. This is just from 3 hours ago. So this is where, of course, I Still Love You is as of now. So you see, it's still a long way to go in terms of distance. It looks like it's not even halfway, really. But in time, it probably is, because it had to wait there at the Panama Canal for quite a while, right?
It did, exactly. There's a queue getting through the Panama Canal, just like any canal system. It also wasn't necessarily going full speed when it came through the Bahamas and around Hispaniola and Cuba, and everything as it's in the navigation channels there. Whereas it's basically, straight shot, turn, weather permitting. And again, all of this is weather permitting because it is hurricane season in the Eastern Pacific as well right now.
Trying to zoom out on that, and Chrome is not allowing me to. It just keeps filling the window. I was going to ask you if you had any idea. I kind of wish Julia was here to tell me, but why they chose to use the semi-submersible on this one, whereas when Just Read the Instructions came over from the West Coast, they just tugged it all the way. Do we have any kind of ideas on why they went that route?
Might have been a lesson learned from Just Read the Instructions, that it's easier to, instead of towing it and navigating it that way, it's just easier and quicker to put it on a semi-submersible. Boom, there you go.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It did lift it up high enough so that the wings weren't bumping into the sides of the canal. It looked like for me whenever I was looking at it.
I believe.
But when just read the instructions
I
went
wish
through, I
Julia
think,
was here for this.
yeah,
She could have all of that. I mean, yeah, I think it came down to an efficiency thing because SpaceX is
yeah,
all about efficiency. So when you see them make a change, most likely that,
it's a
probably
lesson
less
learned.
work to get it ready once it's in the port of LA too, for its operational needs.
Right. Okay. Let's see. I don't have any questions for about the. Of course, I still love you. So let's move on to another flight that's coming up that we should all be excited about. We are going to see. ULA Atlas V launched the Boeing Starliner on the OFT-2 mission, which is the orbital flight test. It's the second run at it. Of course, we saw it was about a year and a half ago now when they launched it on the first attempt, and there were some issues, but we're pressing
Yes.
towards another attempt to do this uncrewed flight test. What do we know so far about that?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the Atlas, actually, because 9 days ago on June 17th, the core stage of the Atlas V reached the launch vehicle on stand milestone, meaning it was stacked on the mobile launcher at Slick 40 inside of the vertical integration facility. The twin AJ-60A solid rocket boosters from Aerojet Rocketdyne are also being attached at this point to the side of the Atlas booster, and the Centaur upper stage will be integrated in the coming weeks atop of that. Once they are done, the wet dress rehearsal will be completed. So they'll haul the Atlas Centaur duo without Starliner out to the launch pad. They'll fuel it up, go through a full countdown operation, but stop just short of actually lighting the RD-180 engines, because the RD-180s really aren't designed to be lit in a static fire configuration like this on the pad. So basically, they do everything but ignite the engines, and the engines are very reliable. The RD-180s are a very reliable engine. So that is coming along quite nicely. We did have a mission order swap, which was interesting. The SPT-3 mission, Space Test Program 3 mission, was originally supposed to be launching around this time, between the 23rd and the 26th of June. That mission encountered delays that then necessitated swapping them around so that Starliner could hold its July 30th target date for liftoff. So after the wet dress rehearsal is complete, they'll bring everything back to the vertical integration facility, and then they will bring out the Starliner. And Starliner is sporting a couple of upgrades on this one, not just with all the things that had to be changed because of the issues that were revealed on OFT-1, but they have also added a opening and a openable and closable little nose cone at the top, just like Dragon has. So they are no longer throwing away the docking adapters and the docking interfaces between each mission. They'll have a little nose cone that will close over it and protect it so they can reuse it. This was not an original part of the Starliner design. That nose cone originally on OFT-1 just popped off shortly after they were injected into their suborbital insertion trajectory. And then they basically would not really be able to reuse the docking interfaces and adapters. They would have to replace those from mission to mission, but they've added the new openable, hingeable nose cone. So that will debut on this one, so they'll be able to reuse that. They, of course, have all the software upgrades and everything from all of the issues that were discovered on OFT-1. They have also fixed the radio interference issue that was preventing some of the that was causing some of the communication problems with the vehicle, as well as it just being in the wrong attitude because it thought it was at a different point in its flight. So they've definitely fixed all of that. And yeah, basically what we're now going to do is the CRS-22 Cargo Dragon and Crew Dragon Endeavour are currently both berthed to the two international docking adapters. The Starliner will need one of them, so the CRS-22 Dragon will depart from the ISS in early July, clearing up one of the international docking adapters for Starliner. I don't believe it's officially confirmed yet whether or not the Dragon will actually change docking ports to allow Starliner to come to the Node 2 forward, or if Starliner will have to make use of the space-facing Zenith port on IDA 3. A couple of reasons for that. You usually don't want to undock and redock your crewed spacecraft halfway through a crew flight that's supposed to end and go all the way until November, because if for whatever reason Dragon is unable to return and dock to the International Space Station, those 4 crew members have to come home. Right. And now you've dropped the International Space Station from 7 down to 3. So not really sure yet. We'll see that sort of finalization take place as the flight readiness reviews are held for Starliner. But they also did confirm that Rosie the Riveter will be back on board, the anthropomorphic test subject. Oh gosh, I forget what they call her. Something like that.
I saw Rosie on there, and I was like, wait a minute, because that's what me and my roommate call our Roomba. We call it Rosie. I was like, wait a minute, you got pictures of my Roomba?
There you go. Yes. So Rosie will be on there collecting G-force data and temperature data and everything to help build the complete picture as Starliner is on orbit and docked to the space station of how its environment is affected through its different phases of flight. They didn't get that complete data set on OFT1, so they're flying it again. And also OFT2 will bring up a total of 345 kilograms of cargo up to the space station. 200 of that will be for NASA and the crew on board the space station, and 145 of that will be cargo from Boeing. So things are on track, and OFT2 currently targeting Friday, July 30th at 14:53 Eastern or 18:53 UTC.
July 30th. Okay, 14:53.
July 30th. Yeah,
it's currently our target date, and I'm sure we'll. ULA. Of course, it's a NASA mission, but ULA usually rolls out the red carpet for us for big missions like this. So I'm looking forward to going out there to the pad, getting some photos, being close to this, and some remotes and stuff. That's the part I really look forward to, y'all. Okay. So anything else about this before we move on? I'm seeing that we have stuff about Iridium, and I'm gonna admit that this is like catching me off guard. What is the Iridium stuff?
Yeah. So just very, very, very quickly, Iridium announced that they had a contract to develop some hosted low Earth orbit payloads that could be utilized on not just their constellation, but other low Earth orbit constellations, specifically for the U.S. military. This new contract basically provides the ability to rapidly push messages to hundreds of different devices out in the field simultaneously for situational awareness. Some really good military applications for that the DOD is really interested in. Especially given that Iridium's next constellation, which consists of 66 satellites that look exactly like this one on your screen right now, it can be used on their global constellation. It can be used on other global constellations like Starlink or Kuiper or OneWeb or Viasat. So lots of potential applications for this, and basically it was a $30 million research and development contract that they won from the U.S. government for this type of communication. So just another application and use of the Iridium constellation, which of course we all saw launch over the course of 8 missions with SpaceX off of the West Coast here from Vandenberg. So,
right. All right. So that's that. Does anybody want to talk about Starship? Is that something we do? There's this big silvery colored cylinder out there in the Texas desert. Yeah, so so
many cylinders.
Yeah, yes, lots of cylinders. Some of them are capable of flying, and some of them are not.
Yeah, and it's good that we're landing on this particular image right now to start with, because it's definitely been tower segment watch here at NSF the last few days, where we've been waiting for them to stack what is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th overall tower segment. And this is a live camera view too. So this isn't a picture. This isn't anything. This is coming from one of our live cameras at Starbase. So yeah, we've been watching the big Franken crane has been in position to lift this tower segment for a couple of days, but it hasn't happened yet. So waiting for that 6th tower segment to go up here at Boca Chica, and of course there's been some other work around the production site this week as well, and
there's been some movements. Tyler actually, Tyler got a really cool shot of the underbelly. Yeah, it was Tyler Gray that took this, right? As the 2. What is it? The BN 2.1. After it had been tested and they were rolling it back, and he got super close to it.
Yeah,
and I don't know what all this stuff is.
That was me on one of our robots. It drove right past the robot.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Yeah. So Michael, so that was Michael on the robot. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's some great detail on some of the plumbing and the bottom elements of the tank there. You know, one of the things when these things are on the stands and they're kind of far away is, you know, we don't get to see the nice business end of them down there. So it was really cool to get to see in close-up detail, sort of like we got to see when they moved SN16 out of the high bay and around toward SN15. And we got that epic shot that Jack got as it drove by us underneath. So it's just nice to get a picture of what we don't normally see, and you know, so we can really appreciate, like, these vehicles are complicated. Even though we keep saying that, you know, like, the design of them is to de-engineer them as much as possible. Right, there's still a lot of complexity to these vehicles. They are still rockets, and it's pictures like this for me that help hammer home and help stay grounded, because it is very easy to get caught up in the excitement when things are going right, you know, and to get caught up in the, like, yes, you know, because this is our future. It's so much of what we want our space program to be and what we want it to expand into, that it's easy to overlook the complexity, and pictures like that original one really hit home for me, and because then you get pictures like this of the simplicity aspects of just building cryogenic shells to go over your propellant tanks at your orbital launch site, right? It's just and you know, like, it's just such a nice little juxtaposition there of the simplicity versus the technical. But I guess the big news right this week was sort of the continuation of that. Will SN16 fly?
Yeah,
or
that's a big question mark.
Or what are they doing on it? Because I know there's some work that's been going on SN16 over by 15. I know we had the tweet from Elon late last week. Maybe I can't remember if it was when we were on the air or just after we got off the air from NSF Live, that was also talking about the potential for SN16 to potentially do a hypersonic test flight. Yeah, it's all just sort of moving along. I think the other interesting thing that I caught this week, and curious on your all's take on this, was when Gwen Shotwell said that July was still very much the target for the first orbital flight test, and I felt like that meme of Thor going, really? Like,
yeah,
I mean, mainly because I don't see the progress at the orbital launch site that would lead me to believe that's even possible. But Gwen is also someone who's known for giving the more realistic timeline of the two.
That's true.
So that was a little interesting for me. But then again, we also heard Elon say that booster number 2 is going out to the suborbital test stand for ground testing. It won't fly. It's now going to be booster 3 that does the flight with maybe Starship 20. You know, so we still see things are very, very fluid there. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think all the propellant tanks are even installed yet at the orbital launch site.
I don't know.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm being being corrected on our back channel. We believe booster 2 was an error on Elon's part, so we're thinking that 3 is the one in the high bay that goes to the suborbital test stand, And booster 4 would fly with Starship 20 on the orbital flight. Okay, I see what SpaceX is doing there. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Oh, now see
yes, but there we go. Sorry, I just wanted to say that because I didn't mean to misspeak there. So yeah, booster 3 is the one in the high bay, and 4 is the one that will fly, and we think 2 was just a mistype. Yeah.
Which I believe is what you're looking at now, booster 3.
Yes.
Right there.
Yes, I believe that is booster 3, formerly BN3. Yes, because we're starting to call them booster 3s now.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, so it's been another week of steady progress, I would say, when you look at everything as a whole, right? Like maybe they didn't get a tower segment stacked yesterday because the winds might have been too high. You know, maybe they're not quite as far along on a tower segment lift as they want to be. But I think when you look at it across the board,
maybe there's just other stuff they feel they can work
and production site. Exactly. Its progress is still going at a very good pace down there, even if the visuals this week really didn't. Even if the visuals wouldn't seem to say that this week, like nothing major changed the location, right? Except for I think test tank 2.1 got removed from its test stand and brought over to Retirement Village with them. But other than that, like it was good progress on building things out, on outfitting things on the ground, on continuing that overall push. Because at a certain point when you're building a launch site, the really, really visible stuff will stop because it becomes your outfitting, your propellant line runs, you're filling your gas tanks, running electrical lines, and things along that path. There we go. I can't figure out what the end of that sentence was trying to be, so it required a mid-sentence adjustment.
Okay, well, I know that everyone's been waiting for the Starship part of the show, so let's see if we have any questions here. Paul says, are they going to static fire 20 plus Raptors on BN3 on a suborbital stand?
Oh, that's okay. Are they going to static fire Starship 20 and the booster? Is that the question?
Maybe what they're saying is, are they gonna static fire 20 plus, as in like 20 plus, like more than 20 Raptors on BN3?
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think this is a good question. SpaceX does like static fires. I think it will be interesting to see what they opt to do with Starship 20. Will they haul it to a suborbital pad first, fill it up, test it, do a static fire on it, and then do the static fire on the super heavy as well, and then bring them together and mate them? That way you can still do the static fires of each one individually, because you couldn't do a static fire of Starship if it was stacked on top of the booster, right?
Right. And
so,
I don't think they would.
Maybe they would do something like that, but I think to your second question about the booster static fire is, you would want to ignite all 29 Raptor engines in the
but not
same
on the suborbital stand.
Not on the suborbital stand, no. I could see them do a Starship 20 test on the suborbital, but I'm almost fairly confident that in order to fire all 29 Raptors, you need the sound suppression system at the orbital pad, you need the height that it gives you above the ground, and everything like that. And I really don't believe the suborbital pads were ever designed to take that kind of a beating from an acoustic, thermal, energy standpoint. But I do think they would. I would see no reason why you would not static fire all 29 engines on the booster simultaneously, near simultaneous, because it is a staggered sequence start on all of the engines.
Yeah, you definitely want to test that out.
Exactly, because that's exactly what you have to do to lift it off. So just like we see them do with the Falcon 9, I think we'll see a lot of testing on the booster to try to get that ignition sequence down and really make sure they understand it, because that's only 2 engines shy of the worldwide record on a craft going uphill, and the only one that beats it so far, it didn't end well. So
and folks, what you're seeing now, these are of course the daily videos that come out of Boca Chica. We put these out on the YouTube channel every day. So make sure you're subscribed so you can keep up to date on what's going on. Right now we have, who all do we have out there? I know we've got Tyler Gray. Is Dawson, Texas right now?
DOS is doing something for us right now out there as well. Yes.
And
Mary
Brady was
on.
there.
Yeah, Brady was there until earlier this week. And yes, and Mary is still on her much deserved vacation, but she will be back early next week, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, and none of this again, would be possible without all the support that everybody throws our way.
And in the background too, to all of our editors who take all that footage and put it together, and to our community that helps with labeling and everything like that. The daily videos are a multi-person community effort here. Yeah.
All right, let's hit a couple questions here. Cameron, are we likely to see any more testing of Super Heavy, or are they confident enough to go straight for launch?
I think we'll definitely see testing with Super Heavy. Booster 3, which is currently in the high bay, is the one that we expect will make the journey to the suborbital launch pad, where it will undergo fuel testing and cryogenic proof testing and things along those lines. And then, of course, we would expect that booster 4, the first orbital booster, would undergo a complete fueling and static fire at the orbital launch site as well for all 29 of its Raptor engines.
Okay. Let's see.
And there they are together, 15 and 16. Look at that.
I looked at the wrong.
Now
it's onto something else. Yeah, I've got a different view on the other monitor here than what. Okay, so Zach was captured, I think is the way this name is supposed to be said. What do you think your reactions will be if the SN20 orbital flight is successful? Oh man.
Okay.
It'll be a lot like watching the first hop.
Okay, so by successful, I assume what we mean is the liftoff is successful. The first stage functions as intended with no engines out during ascent. The separation is clean. The booster does its flip, its turnaround, boost back burn, and landing burn. I don't know if they do entry burns on. I don't know if the planets do an entry burn or not. Anyway, if success is nothing goes wrong, like no engine quits, the booster does a successful soft splashdown, the SN20 or Starship 20 comes through reentry and does the flip and burn and does a soft touchdown in the Pacific, I'd be amazed if nothing went wrong. Not because I'm expecting something to go wrong, but a first flight and getting to orbit on your first attempt, very, very, very difficult. I mean, that is a small club of companies that have managed to do that. And SpaceX is one of them with the Falcon 9, but not with the Falcon 1. So it's very, very hard. I'd be amazed if they got it on the first one. Never say never, because it's not impossible. They've done it before. Other companies have done it before. One time we even did it with humans for the very first time.
That's true. Yeah. Folks, he's talking about the first shuttle flight.
Yes. But yeah, not impossible. But would I also be surprised if maybe they did have a couple engines out on Super Heavy, on the way uphill? Maybe Super Heavy doesn't exactly nail everything on the comeback side of things. I think what we're going to need to hear from SpaceX, like we do for a lot of companies, is what is it that they need to consider the flight a success?
Right.
Right. Because a full, complete flight envelope is not necessarily the thing that you would aim for in a success, right? Because you can learn a lot from whatever the failure point might be, but they might be like, hey, if we could just get it into the proper suborbital trajectory, where it will automatically come back in 100 kilometers north of Hawaii, that might be what they aim for, right? Just the successful ascent. So we'll need to see what they consider to be the threshold for success here.
Yeah.
And then we will hold them accordingly to that. Right.
Right.
Well, and I think this is important
Well,
because
also,
Philip, it goes back to SLS, right, where NASA was very clear that, hey, this is the full duration firing we're aiming for, but if we get to this point, we've actually got everything we need, and we would consider it a success. And then when they didn't hit that, they had to redo it. Right, for the second time. But that's exactly what I'm talking about here. Not a like,
almost
it doesn't have to be fully successful and we still call it a success. What are their goals for the flight?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. What were you going to say, Philip? Or did you have something to add there?
Well, I think I think it's the nature of the way that they're developing the vehicle. So, I mean, I don't know that they're necessarily defining success as hitting, let's say they had 10 test objectives. Well, what if they don't hit them until the second flight? Is that not successful? They may not be defining in terms of we need to hit these objectives in this one flight. It's we have a set of test objectives. We have a series of tests that we're doing with these vehicles, and when we get all of those, then we're done. And it might be 5 vehicles, it might be 2 vehicles, it might be 1.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess it's possible it could even be 1. So, it's the same. I'm kind of saying the same thing Chris is saying, which is we need to understand. Well, we don't need to, but we're trying to understand what they're trying to get to at the end of their test series. And of course, there's also the possibility that the results of the first test they'll feed that back into what their goals are for the entire test series. They may decide, okay, we got enough data, and we don't need to. We can start to bring in some objectives from further test series down the road instead of, it's kind of like I think I'm remembering some Saturn. Back in the 60s and Saturn test series where they had like 10 test flights set up and they hit all their test objectives after the first flight. Like, well, what are we going to do with these other 9 tests? So they probably already have a good idea about where they're going from their first set of tests, and it'll just be a question of, okay, let's move on to the next cycle in their iterative development.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that sort of is very different for people is not just the rapid cadence of SpaceX's testing, how we coincidentally have 2 different companies on very different test tracks. Right, and it's not that SpaceX's is better than NASA's. It's not that NASA's is better than SpaceX's, right? It's the reality of NASA is a government-funded agency. They can't build as many of them as it takes to figure it out, right? You can't do that with government funds. SpaceX can, right?
Yep.
It's just 2 different approaches to the same ultimate goal of having a working vehicle. Now, I think to that end, the only other thing I would say to this sort of rapid iterative development is, it's not necessarily what Philip was saying there. It's not necessarily a cop-out or us giving SpaceX more of a benefit of a doubt over NASA to say, well, it might take them 3 flights to accomplish the overall goal. That doesn't necessarily mean that flights 1 and 2 were a failure versus a success. It becomes kind of hard with private companies to make that determination, which is why I say I want to hear what their goals are.
Yeah. Let's do one more question here. Can they? This is John Cobb. Can they fire the Raptor vacuum engines on SN20 with the flow separation? So they're talking about firing them at sea level, right?
You can fire sea level engines. You can fire vacuum engines at sea level. There is a reduction, for testing purposes. There is a reduction in their efficiency when they are used on the ground because the expansion ratio of the nozzle is not what you want it to be optimized for at sea level, but you can fire them. And they still, exactly, and they do test fire the Raptor Vacs, that's what I call them, the Raptor Vacs at McGregor. So yes, static fire testing them, they're just not as efficient, but they can totally be fired on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I believe that's gonna wrap us up. Let me think. We've got a few super chats that are still sitting here. Most of them, you guys were just showing support and didn't even have a question. So I'm just gonna thank you guys. Kendall Winters, Grayson Holt, Nico111, Michael Etherton, Quiazakal. I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't say that one. VDiv, Jim Cavett, Manuel McGregor, and Future Martian. We appreciate that. And of course, actually, that first one, Kendall Winters and Manuel McGregor, those are some new members that we have. And remember, welcome, you can always become, welcome aboard. These are, if you join at a launch director or flight engineer, you get your name on this screen right here. And that money helps us do everything that we do, bringing you the live views and having people down there in Texas, being able to give Mary some time off and then get some of our other team members down there to cover and still deliver daily videos, and also, improved equipment and, all the stuff that goes on. So we really appreciate that ongoing support. Once again, my name is not Doss. I'm Stephen Marr. I'm a photographer for NASASpaceflight. And with me today, we had Mr. Philip Sloss. Oh, I got it right with my hand. Who is our resident SLS expert. Thank you for joining us, Philip.
Thanks, Stephen. We'll hope to see you guys again pretty soon.
And also, of course, everybody knows Chris G. That's our assistant managing editor, Chris Gebhardt. Thank you, Chris.
As always, it's always a great pleasure to talk about anything space related.
Absolutely. And then behind the scenes, of course, pulling levers and flipping switches, we had Michael Baylor. And thank you very much. You can chime in if you want to, Michael. Otherwise,
thank you for watching. I appreciate everybody's support.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see y'all later.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
Our EPA chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Echo Delta nominal.
Flight now, feed off. Bring in, feed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.